Council will call this meeting to order. For the record, it is August 13, 2024 at 6 p.m. We'll begin tonight's Burgess City Council meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts. Here. Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here remotely.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight's committee invocation will be delivered by Nate Wheeler. Mr. Wheeler, if you want to go ahead and come forward. And for those in the audience, if you would like to join us in the community invocation, please do so or take this as a moment of silence and reflection. Nate, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Mayor, council members, and Mr. Parsons. Good to see you here again. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Let's pray. God, I want to thank you for this day. I want to thank you for this time. I want to thank you for these servants here in this town. I want to pray that you can continue to bless them and guide them and direct them and to continue to make our town and a community that people want to be in. Lord, thank you for the ways that they have been taking care, not only in the growth, but also in the safety. Continue to give them wisdom, continue to protect their families, give them insights, help them be able to foresee beyond their own, be able to allow them to see the needs of this community in a deeper way, and be able to continue to build the city up in a way that makes it long-term commitment and an opportunity for people to want to come to for years to come. And in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Nate. Appreciate you. Next item up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I see no changes to tonight's agenda, so I move we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is agreed to. Next item up is the consent agenda.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
we approve the consent agenda as presented for the mayor to sign, the clerk to attest.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. There were no items moved from the consent agenda. So, Mr. Clerk, do we have anyone signed up under public forum?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay, then with that, we will move right into our action items for this evening. First item up is item 24, which is a public hearing for Luna Hospice H 2024-0012. We will open this public hearing with staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. First item on the agenda tonight is a request for annexation and conditional use permit for the Luna Hospice application. The site consists of 1.03 acres of land, currently zoned R1 in Ada County, and is located at 525 East Overland Road. Future land use designation on this property is medium density residential. However, this project before you tonight is residential in nature. It is a non-residential use on this site. And as such, in the comprehensive plan, you are given the authority to allow a commercial or office use on this property, even though it has a residential designation on it. So that's something that we've asked as part of the request tonight. The applicants asked for the council to grant that non-residential use. So the applicant is here again to annex in the property with an R8 zoning district. And because of the R8 zone, the nursing care facility does require conditional use in that residential zoning district. And they want to operate a 14-bed hospice care facility. So in the UDC, that is defined as a nursing or residential care facility. You can see here the differences in the site plan. So when we were before Planning and Zoning Commission, the applicant submitted the plan on the left-hand side of your screen, labeled as previous site plan. And since the Planning and Zoning Commission, the applicant has revised that site plan based on the conversations that were held based on the conditions in the staff report and conversations held at the Planning and Zoning Commission here. Access to this development is currently, the only access to this site will be from Overland Road, which is an arterial roadway. And on the left-hand graphic here, you can see the existing driveway approach, which is U-shaped. That will be replaced, and per the recommendation of staff, commission, and ACHD, the applicant has shifted their driveway location to the easternmost portion of the site, which allows access to this property, one access to this property. So we're consolidating accesses, which is consistent with the code. But it also sets up the adjacent properties to the east and the adjacent property to the west that are also in the county that may redevelop at some point in the future. So we're getting that cross access, which is also envisioned by the UDC. So again, I think they compliment the applicant for making those changes so that we can share those with you this evening. Go ahead and transition to the landscape plan here so you can see how that would relate in accordance to UDC standards. So because this is an RA zoning district, the applicant doesn't necessarily need to provide a landscape buffer to the surrounding residential uses. But you can see in this exhibit that they are proposing a 20-foot buffer along the southern boundary and the eastern boundary to provide that buffer. But as I mentioned in the hearing outline and in the staff report, on the west side of the site, there is an existing garage that will remain and be used for storage for the proposed use. And there's also a driveway that provides access to that. So that's why you see a lesser buffer on that side as well. And again, the commission was comfortable with that. And also in the staff report and in your hearing outline this evening, I would mention to the council that the actual structure itself, the existing garage does encroach within the R8 setback if this property is annexed and zoned. So typically in an R8 zone, we require a 5-foot setback. And you can see here in the graphic here, may be encroaching about a foot within that setback. Again, it would just be considered a non-conforming structure, which is allowed in our code. It's just any future expansions any non-conforming structure would just have to meet the current setback standards for that addition, not necessarily remove the whole entire building. So again, because it was being used as storage, the commission was comfortable with it remaining as a non-conforming structure on the site. And I also point out to the council that the existing home is far away, is outside of the setback. So it's really just the detached structure, not any part of the structure or the addition. So the existing home on the site is about 2,000, little over 2,000 square feet. And then the applicant is also proposing as part of the conditional use to build on another 2,000 square feet. So that you're looking at over 4,000 square feet of structure on this property, and then putting in the associated parking with that. So all of that does meet UDC standards as well. Here is some sample elevations of the addition. Again, the applicant will have to come back once annexed, go through the certificate of zoning compliance process, design review process with the staff, and we'll make sure that the addition matches in with the surrounding properties and looks residential in nature. Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval at the June 20th hearing, and then weren't really any items of discussion discussed at the hearing. So, and the only outstanding issue for the council this evening is what we had hoped for was when we looked at the legal description for the annexation request, there are certain requirements that the State Tax Commission requires. And the documentation that was provided with the application didn't quite meet those standards. So we didn't want the applicant to get hung up at the tax commission if this is approved for annexation. We had hoped to get the revised documents before the city council hearing, and that did not happen. So tonight I'm asking you to add a condition to this project as part of the annexation comments that they get that exhibit to us prior to the city adopting the ordinance. We really need to get that buttoned up so that if this moves forward and they get forward, submitted to the tax commission for approval for annexation, that they meet those requirements. So I would ask that the council add that to your motion this evening. I've had a chance to look at the public record. There is no public testimony on this application. So again, should be pretty straightforward. Both the Planning and Zoning Commission staff have recommended approval to you, and I'll conclude my presentation and stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Bill. Council, any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
just a quick question, Bill. On the revised landscape plan with that cross access, is that going to be like a driveway or more like a kind of a road? What is that actually going to look like?
Mayor, members of the council, yes, that will actually be black asphalt to provide the drive aisle to the parking, and then also stub to the adjacent property for future cross access. And then along Overland is a 20-foot wide landscape buffer. Code requires 25 feet, but if they use water conserving design concepts, they can reduce that buffer by half, but they've only elected to go down to 20 feet. So their buffer will still meet UDC standards.
Council, any additional questions for staff? Would the applicant like to come forward? And we'll get to public testimony in a minute.
I'm Carmen Weber. I am Carmen Weber. I'm representing Weber Design Studio. I'm the landscape architect on the project. Claire Smartett.
I mean, can you get closer to the mic so we have our remote listeners here?
So I'm Carmen Weber. I'm representing Weber Design Studio. I'm the landscape architect on the project. And Claire Smartett is the civil engineer. She can be here today. She's with Civil Sphere Engineering. And
My name is Albert Liu. I'm one of the co-owners of Luna Hospice. We currently have a hospice home in Nampa right now and trying to expand into Meridian. So if you have any questions for me, please let me know.
Council, any questions for the applicant? Councilman Cavanagh.
Yes.
Dean, thank you for being here tonight. I did have just a quick question. This may be a little bit out of right field, but do you prohibit your employees to smoke at work? Are you a non-smoking facility or?
If on our agreement for the staff, if they smoked, it would be outside, 20 feet to, I think it was 25 feet away from the building.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
Officially, that's where at least my hesitation is. We've got kind of residential use, and I guess what I somewhat worry about is that, again, people make their own decisions about tobacco usage, but would want to be really sensitive about us not impacting the residential sides that are kind of on both sides of you with having somebody who's using tobacco. So I don't know where we've got the kind of the storage garage that's already outside the setback area. That's the part that I kind of look at. That would be the natural maybe spot where somebody would be on a break, would hang out, and that puts it in pretty close to the neighbors. And so I don't know. I don't think that's something you have considered. I just don't know what you guys think is the best remedy around that.
I think we would look at the location. I think there'll be like a smoking area, and it would be away from any of the setback areas.
We may talk about this a little bit more, but I appreciate your willingness to try and solve that. So thank you.
No problem.
Council, any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Mr. Clerk, do we have anybody signed to provide testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor, just Robert Sperry.
What was the name?
Robert Sperry.
If you'd like to come forward, please come forward and if you can state your name and address for the record, please.
Rodney Brody, 1058 East Dominica Drive, Meridian Greens. And we have an irrigation pipe that goes under this neighborhood. And we are obligated to provide water to this and the house east of there. And our pipe can't be covered up. We have to have access to it. And if they want to move it, they couldn't move it until after the irrigation season. But it's very difficult. We have a truss block right under that neighborhood. So the whole thing would have to be moved. And I don't think there's room to move it back any further. We have a 4-inch pipe coming in at that lot. It is divided into two 1-inch pipes, one going to the other one, and that first one, that lot gets 1 inch of water.
Council, any questions? Okay. All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to provide testimony on this application? Either in the room or anybody online. If you're online, you can use the Zoom function and use the raise your hand feature. Seeing no one coming forward or raising their hand. Would you like the applicant to come up now to see if they can answer those questions? That doesn't sound like we have the subject matter expert from the applicant here that could answer that unless they think they can. So if the applicant would like to come forward to close and
I couldn't quite hear him very clearly back there. Would you mind reiterating what he had mentioned in his comments, please?
he was mentioning the irrigation facilities that are located on the property and the challenges with what could or couldn't be done with them due to how they provide to neighboring properties.
Okay. Yeah, we've looked into it and we are working with the adjacent HOA that is contributing with the pressurized irrigation that's currently on site right now. We are aware of the different sizes of pipes on site and we plan to not exceed any of our rights that we are allowed. Additionally, we understand that construction has to happen within the irrigation like non-irrigated period of the year so that we don't prevent irrigation for adjacent uses. So we are planning on accommodating all neighbors and not disrupting any of their current water service.
Council, clarifying comments, questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
to kind of clarify, so is the current irrigation already underground?
Yes.
And the previous testimony said that can't be covered. I'm not sure what that means. Does that mean by like blacktop, by facility? I mean, what exactly are we talking about by the irrigation can't be covered?
Access to it. So then that would provide, that would be like a box, like a gate that you could service it. So wherever the connection points are, it's not completely covered. So for future maintenance, you'd be able to get in there and access it.
So actually, I think 6 or 7 months ago, somebody did come to dig out the main and replace it. So where the main is, we will not be building on top of that. That would still be the area that you see behind there. It would be within the setback. So the access should not be an issue since, they already came and dug up and replaced the main.
Just so everyone knows, it runs along the south side of the property within that setback.
Parallel to the fence.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Strader.
I have a question for planning staff. Hi, Bill. Do we not usually receive like a letter from the irrigation district, just kind of formalizing their review? Where are we at with that? And how would you expect this issue to be resolved? Would you expect this issue to be resolved before approving it? Help me understand what we would normally do with this.
Certainly, I can certainly look in the public record and see if we received anything, but just for context of this conversation, Mayor, Councilwoman Strader, it depends on the size of the facility. A lot of times Napa Meridian, Settlers Irrigation, New York Canal Company, they have a broader area they overlook, but they don't deal with all the individual lateral users associations. So sometimes when you get to those small, minute, singular properties, it's hard to identify which group controls what. And that's why we appreciate gentlemen like this coming and saying, hey, and it does throw a wrench in the conversation because we don't expect that to occur. But if it was a larger facility, absolutely, we would have something from Napa Meridian that says, provide a land use application change with us and go through the changes. I think in this particular case, it sounds like the facility's already built, the water rights are associated with this property. So it really is more of a private matter than a public matter, but there are state laws that tries to protect that for each individual. So as long, the positive thing that I heard about the conversation is that they're working with the HOA, and as long as they don't build over it and they have a ways to maintain it and access it, and there's an agreement to that effect and everyone agrees to it, I think staff is still comfortable with them moving forward with developing the site. But let me look at the public record and see if we got any official comments from any of the irrigation providers.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
for what it's worth, I'm generally supportive of the request. I do always worry, well, there's certain, to our planning staff's point, certain state laws that direct you can't impede or get in the way of the flow of water from a previous water right. I'd feel more comfortable in voting in approval once those Ts have been crossed and the Is have been dotted on that particular piece. While this would eventually become a civil matter, I wouldn't want to necessarily have a council action that then has to then result in a civil disagreement between a homeowners association and a property owner. So I was trying to see if I could get our packet opened up tonight. So I'm hoping that our planning staff may have much more magical approach at getting that, and we can get some of these things, just so that I've got good confidence for our existing residents that they're gonna be able to have what they need. You guys are gonna be able to go forth and develop your property the way that you want. And this is nothing that everyone ever has to worry about down the road.
So Mayor, members of the council, it sounds like our laserfish system is having some issues this evening, but Chris was able to pull up the letter. We did get some from Nampa Meridian. It's their typical comment. So nothing to this granular level of what's occurring on the site to give us any insight what's happening there. So again, it seems like it's more of them working something out and determining a path forward.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
Bill, to that point, again, I know sometimes we get in the weeds on these little things. We kind of have the necessity kind of make them maybe larger than they need to be. But I guess from planning staff's perspective, if council's supportive of the annexation with a condition that occupancy is not granted until any of the water issues have been resolved, is that something planning is supportive of, or do you have a better mechanism so that our homeowner association representative feels like, hey, they've got good confidence that their water is not going to be impeded? The applicant has great confidence that they can go on and develop their project, and this isn't something that we have to worry about.
Mayor, members of the council, I think that's a great solution. Let's come up with a condition and say, provide us written documentation that it's been satisfied and everyone agrees to it, and maintain it. And we can hold them up at occupancy or even building permit. It's whatever level you want to do that. There's many steps to go still before they get under construction, but it's certainly within your purview to do that with a conditional use permit or even the annexation.
Council, any additional questions, comments?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Just then back to, I know it's kind of a weird thing, the no smoking within 20 feet of your landscape barrier. I assume that's something that, it sounds like you're going to kind of voluntarily impart on yourselves. I don't know if it is something I'd be comfortable setting as a condition for annexation. I think it would be hard for us to enforce. It's just, I think it's in line of what I think your business model is about, is being a good neighbor. I think this complements the area. I just want to make sure that we're doing all of our part to not impact both your residents that are going to be staying there, that are going through their own health challenges, as well as the existing neighbors.
Any additional questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I move that we close the public hearing on item number 24, H-2024-0012.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I think this is a fairly straightforward application. Although some unique nuances that I want to make sure that at least I'm prepared to make a motion unless there's any deliberation that I'm seeing from anybody. But Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve item number 24, application H-2024-0012. It's a request for annexation and a conditional use permit with two conditions. One is that planning staff be provided the documentation from the Idaho Tax Commission prior to issuing building permits. Mr. Mr. Mayor, sorry, I'm looking for a planning department to give me some direction. I forgot.
Mayor, council, that's prior to ordinance adoption because it has to be
That's right.
part of the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Mayor. I'll revise my motion that conditions that the applicant provide the exhibits from the tax commission prior to ordinance issuance. And a second condition that they will provide a satisfactory letter of acceptance from the Meridian Greens Homeowners Association about the usage of irrigation water to meet the needs of the homeowners association.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
maybe I didn't catch it, but was the um, letter of acceptance from the HOA prior to any particular milestone?
Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councilmember Strader. I think prior to issuance of occupancy.
Second agree?
I agree.
Is there further discussion, clarification?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I guess it's just a question, kind of a question for planning staff. If, I don't know if that's causing that, but Bill, you had said prior to building permits or occupancy would be a good milestone for that. If there was a conflict about this or an issue, that could take some time, right, to play out. Is there a milestone that you would think would make sense that would be sooner than that? Just my example would be, maybe I'm worried about a scenario that's kind of far-fetched, but let's say that there is a disagreement between the homeowners association and the owner of this property, and they start building something, and then they were to cover up somehow the irrigation facilities or impact it in some way. How would that get resolved sooner? Because I would hate to have that go on all the way up until building permits at the end of the process, right?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, Councilwoman Strader, certainly, as I mentioned, step one is to get annexed. And that's going to take, there's going to be executed development agreement. Let's get the ordinance done. That's going to be several weeks down the road. We're nearing the end of irrigation season, so we know that's going to end in October. So once annexation occurs, they still have to come back for a certificate of zoning compliance and design review. So again, your stopgap can be prior to, with CZC submittal, you provide it, or it can be prior to building permit, you provide it, because then they're not getting permitted to go vertical on construction until we have that issue resolved. Like you said, if we get to occupancy and all of a sudden they're wanting to open the doors and this has not been resolved, it's going to look bad for the city to hold up them opening when it's a need in the community, and I don't want to put that burden on the applicant. So that's why I said you have many different points in the process where you can do that. Now, if you do it prior to with CZC submittal, then again, that kind of delays them from getting to building permit and getting under construction. So there's consequences at each phase for them, but if I'm not hearing from this gentleman that it seems like it's a difficult conversation to have. I didn't get that impression, but he just wanted you to be aware that they need access to that and that there's some things they should be aware of as they approach development on the site that they have to maintain.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman McCaver.
maybe just at least to kind of speak to kind of where I was headed on that is I don't foresee this as being an issue, but I think it's a pretty good carrot to say, hey, you can't actually start get inside your building and doing the things that you want to do until this issue is resolved, but it gives the applicant a lot of flexibility and time to slow the project down so they can be working on this in parallel with all the other elements of their project. Gives, I think, the neighbors good assurances, hey, they're not going to start operating their facility until this issue's been resolved.
And Mayor, Council, they may have to upgrade the system in order to irrigate their site too. So it is going to take coordination and collaboration with everybody to make sure that they can irrigate their site as well.
Thank you.
You good? That's what I'm trying to figure out if we're
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, my only hesitation or concern was I just would have been more comfortable with an earlier milestone so that we would know that this is sort of resolved and not, it seems like a very remote risk, end up in a place where something's been built over the existing pipes and then we have to provide a waiver, or the neighbors have somehow been impacted, but then we can't take action. So I would feel more comfortable if it was prior to the CZC. I'm not sure it rises to the level of me voting against it, but that's kind of where I was coming from.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
I would agree with Councilwoman Strader's decision if they chose to change the motion to an earlier point in this process instead of at the very end.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
that's why I love our team. I'm gonna withdraw my motion and present a new motion if the second's in. All right.
Have a request to withdraw with the second agreeing. I don't know in my world if that requires a unanimous consent agreement. I think it does, but we won't go there in this case.
Okay.
I'm going back to my parliamentarian days. I'm pretty sure it does, but we will call it good. Go ahead, Mr.
All right,
Cavanagh.
wow. It's, we need some government students here tonight to watch this play out. Mr. Mayor, new motion. I move that we approve item 24, Luna Hospice H-2024-0012. That is the annexation and the CUP with the following conditions. That the applicant provide the exhibits from the Idaho Tax Commission prior to ordinance issuance, and that the applicant also provide a letter of acceptance and support from the homeowners association, the Meridian Greens Homeowners Association, as it pertains to the pressurized irrigation prior to issuance of CZC.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve item H 2024-0012. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh,
Aye.
Little Roberts, Taylor, Overton,
Aye.
Strader,
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Thank you and good luck. All right. Next item up is item 25, a public hearing for UDC text amendment 2024 ZOA 2024-0001. We will open this public hearing with staff comments.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Main event for for this evening, UDC text amendment. So interesting, I looked at when I was in front of you last year at this, and I just realized it was about a year ago from last year that I was in front of you talking about code amendments. And it's interesting how you kick off these meetings, you meet with the UDC focus group, and then things kind of morph and you end up with more changes than you planned on bringing forward. So I know we have a new council and some new council members, and some of them haven't been here through some recent code updates. So I at least want to give you some background and how what we do and how we get here and how we vet this information so you understand that it's not done in a vacuum. We're not sitting in a room just talking with staff. It is meant to be a transparent and open process. So back in about 2014, 2015, the council at the time directed staff to form what was called a UDC focus group. And it's made up of design professionals, various city staff. I've heard from last UDC focus, last time I was in front of you, council wanted me to have some citizen representation. I have made that happen as well. So we have broadened our group a little bit, although we've shrunk. We still have some new individuals as well. But again, about every 6 months, I go ahead and we keep track of some code changes. And then as we develop these changes and draft some proposed language, I go ahead and send out a meeting invite to this focus group, and we have a series of meetings, and we sit down and discuss what we want on the docket. We also open it up to the group for them to share any changes they would like to see. So it's not only staff initiated, but we also encourage them to bring things forward. And also, we meet with all of you, Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, and we're like, are there things that you want us to look at in the upcoming year? So it's kind of a hodgepodge. It's well thought. I think it's a well-oiled machine. We've been doing it for, like I said, several years now. And I think it's important because, again, when we're changing code, it's serious. It's not just one piece of property we're affecting. We're affecting the entire city when we make these changes. So I know city staff takes it very serious, and I know the stakeholders do too. And so anytime that we're in front of you proposing these changes, I want the council to feel confident that we have vetted these things, we have looked at these things. And although we may not always get consensus on things, again, it's city staff's job to really make sure that we're looking out for the best interests of the citizens in the city. So keeping that in context, what I typically do is we meet with the group, we vet these in, we make changes, we circulate these changes to the focus group, and then it comes back, and then I schedule it for a hearing. So this particular project was in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission on June 20th, so it has been in play for quite some time. And so again, I looked at the public record this evening, no public comment on this application, which is interesting because usually we do get some citizens that do want to participate and give you feedback on it. So I look at that as a positive thing. I think whenever I come forward with changes and I don't see anyone commenting, I think we probably got it right or close to it. But like anything, codes can change, and I'm here looking for feedback from the council and also anyone that's participating in tonight's hearing. So like anything, when we come with code changes, again, we kind of give you what section of code we're changing and the reason for the change, and we put that in a table format. So this doesn't have to be a formal meeting. Please feel free to chime in on any questions, any part of the code. I'm not going to go through all the changes on these particular graphic. There's just too many to go through tonight, but I do want to highlight a few things. And that's what we try to do. We try to highlight the bigger things or any new code changes that we are bringing forward to you. So I'll go ahead and get right into tonight's presentation and share some of the heavy changes, or at least some of the heavy lifts this year that I think should be some new additions to the city of Meridian. And again, a lot of it is based from either our stakeholders, you as public officials, or even just business owners that want to establish a certain business, but maybe the code doesn't align with what they want to do. So really a couple new ones for you to look at on this first page, a really definition section. So I don't know, council's aware of this, but a lot of times parking always is an issue for the city of Meridian. We're very proud of our parking ratios. And so as you know, as homes increasingly get more and more expensive, it's harder to make them more and more attainable for people. And so a lot of times what we're seeing from home builders is they're coming in with a 2-bedroom home with maybe an office or a flex space. But in our code, we don't necessarily have a definition of a bedroom, so we can't determine whether or not it's a 3-bedroom home or a 2-bedroom home, or it's left to interpretation. And so again, we have the home builder saying it's 2-bedroom. We should only have to provide 2 parking spaces per your code. And then we have staff saying, we see it as a 3-bedroom. You need to provide 4 parking spaces. So what we've tried to do here is add a definition of a bedroom in our code so that we can reinforce what that is. And so then when we're looking at home plans, we can be supported by the code and also be supporting our representatives, our team members in the building department. So it's a little bit dicey here, but again, this is consistent with the definition in the building code. So we're adding that to our zoning code.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilwoman Schrader.
Just a question. I think it's probably covered already in like the building code or the fire code, but I saw the one means of egress. I just wanted to make sure that somewhere else we're independently requiring like a window or something for someone to escape if there's a fire.
Yeah.
From a bedroom.
That's what that is. Yes, they have to have a certain bedroom, an egress into the room. So it would be a certain size window to get in and out, correct?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So maybe just a general comment. I looked through the changes. I'm kind of still digesting them. I was hoping we would hear feedback from members of the public, but you're right. I mean, sometimes it's a good sign. If we don't, maybe we'll hear some tonight. I did kind of just want to add maybe a potential issue that could be a future code change to this list. I don't know when it would be the right time to discuss it, but it came to my attention that there's kind of a gap in allowing home occupation accessory uses when it comes to pools. So we have had some cases come up. I don't want to get into any particular cases, but we have had it, maybe just I'll talk about it generally without singling anyone out, but we have had a person who's operating a neighborhood pool who has been teaching swimming lessons for decades. And there was a code enforcement issue around that could not be resolved, and that person might have to close their business. I grew up taking, neighborhood swimming lessons. I think a lot of kids do. It's very valuable for the community. So I was kind of hoping maybe staff could take a look at that and try to come up with some solutions around that, similar to how we look at daycares, right? Daycares can be approved by the council as a permitted use after a public hearing and hearing from everybody. So I just felt like maybe we could do something around residential pools if they're providing seasonal, swimming lessons.
Mayor, Councilwoman Schrader, I think that's a valid point. I'll get through my changes, and then that way at the end of the conversation, maybe we can have that and see if there's anything else that the council wants us to investigate or look at as we transition through the hearing tonight. And then I'll make that list. But yeah, typically if you give me that feedback, then I go ahead and update our list so that when we kick off the next round of changes, we can vet that through the UDC focus group and add that as one of those items that we can discuss. We always have a running tab of code changes going. I wish it would end at some point, but unfortunately it never does. I'm always here every year talking with you about, it's job security for sure.
Councilwoman Strayer.
Yeah, when it comes to that one specifically, because to me, the UDC focus group is helpful in the sense that we have building professionals, we have citizens that are concerned. I think it's good that they're vetting things. Like this specific instance, I'm not sure it would need to go through the UDC focus group. I would just hate for us to lose one or more Meridian businesses, that have been operating successfully while we have the machinery of government take like another 6 months or a year. It would be great if we could look at that sooner, just from my perspective. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your discussion.
That's okay. I'm aware of the issue, and I thank you for bringing it up.
Councilman Taylor.
All right. Bill, on the definition of a bedroom, curious how closet is defined and curious why that kind of really matters. And I'm just thinking walk into my house on the right-hand side. I have a room that's very much a bedroom, doesn't have a closet. I don't use it as a bedroom. It's my wife, it's our music room. We have pianos and a bunch of music instruments, but it could certainly be a bedroom. So what is our current definition of a bedroom? Or maybe we don't have one, but I want to know like why we would insist on a closet as defined by International Residential Code. If you could just give me some more background on that.
Mayor, council, so the zoning ordinance does not have a definition of a bedroom. This definition aligns with the International Residential Code. So this is the definition that we worked and took right out of code. And the reason why the closet is important is because, again, if a home builder is coming to the city and they want to call it a flex space, but they show these items, are they really going to convert it to a bedroom later? And then all of a sudden we have a parking issue, and then someone's going to come to us and say, hey, I bought a 3-bedroom home, and we're going to be like, no, we stamped your plans as a 2-bedroom home and we don't recognize it as a 3-bedroom home. And we can't approve you as a three-bedroom home because your builder or your home plan showed this as an office. So that's why we have to be very specific. And the closet is what kind of signifies that that's what you're going to use it for. I have an office in my home, but I did not put a closet in it. I built a desk inside the cubby area where the closet would have been, but I could definitely take that out and convert it back to a closet very easily. But you can't create a code to solve all of those issues. But what we can do is try to stop it at the very end and try to make it clear that if this is how you have it, then remove that from your plan and we can approve you as a two-bedroom home versus a three-bedroom. That's what we're trying to do with this code change.
And Mr. Mayor, a quick follow-up.
Councilman Taylor.
And I don't have any concern with that. I mean, my brother and I just bought a home recently and they advertised sort of a landing space that and it was a hallway. So I get it. That said, maybe you don't have the answer for this now. I'd be kind of curious to know, has that been a big problem in the city as a building or a room that says it's a bedroom, it's not, parking, how we've approved that? I'd be kind of curious to know if that's what kind of an issue that has been. It would seem to me, and maybe this is more about parking, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it would seem to me that if someone is advertising a home as having 4 bedrooms, but really it's 3 bedrooms with an office space, that's a consumer protection type of issue if you're fraudulently advertising when you're selling a home what it might be. So I'm wondering, I think I understand and then probably generally agree on being specific here, but I'm having a hard time connecting the dots on why it's needed. And maybe I'd like to hear from the development community too on some of it, but I'm just this is an exercise. It's the first time I'm engaging with it. I'm kind of wondering out loud some of these questions. It just seems strange. And I'd also like to know, why would we, I'm not familiar with the International Residential Code. Is that something that we use regularly? If that's the case, I didn't know that, but so just kind of wondering out loud, thinking out loud here.
And Bill, and I'm going to pile on top of this one because it is unique in this context, because by eliminating our minimum size home standards, which I think is a good move, I'm gonna go build a 450 square foot tiny home on a piece of property, and I have 0 bedrooms that qualify because, I just look at tiny homes. They don't have 70 square feet of bedroom space that would be defined in our code. So can they build that home? Can they not build that home? What do you do for parking in a space that doesn't have a defined bedroom, but you're going to have people sleeping in a space which is not a defined space? Throwing that out there for additional, it says since this is about a parking issue.
It's not necessarily about parking. It's about defining a bedroom. Because again, in the code, we have a definition of a dwelling, and it says you have to have sanitation, a place for sleeping, sanitation, and living. So that's what we're going to lean on. Whether they show a 1-bedroom or a studio, we're still going to say you need to do something. And we're going to lean on the 1 bedroom, and you're going to do a 1-car garage and a parking pad, which is probably going to be bigger than the home,
right?
Which seems to be counterproductive. But as a city, that's where we landed on our parking. We like a lot of parking. And until we're willing to say, you know what, let the community dictate the parking, or the developer do that, or let the market drive the parking, we just have high parking ratios in our city, and that's the reality. And that's why I'm here every year talking to you about parking. But in this particular case, going back to your point, council member, is we are starting to get more and more of this. And my staff has been coming to me saying, I need help. What do I do in these situations? And I'm like, you stamp the plan approved as 2-bedroom. You verify that their application says 2-bedroom, and when you're done approving it, that you've approved it for a 2-bedroom. That's all you can do. You can't predict how it's going to be used in the future. That's not our role. Our role is, does it meet the code? And if it does, we need to sign the permit and approve it. That's what our job is.
So does any dwelling that doesn't have a defined bedroom qualify just only as a studio then? So if you don't have anything that is defined under here, is a studio your
Yeah,
default?
mayor, council, the only place we define a studio is in our multifamily. We don't have a home, a single family dwelling, detached dwelling that's defined as a studio. We do define tiny homes, and it's a tiny home on a foundation. So it would be an R new permit. And as soon as it gets routed to us, regardless of the size, we're going to analyze it and see if it meets the setbacks, the parking requirements, whatever may be based on their floor plan and what they're submitting for. They have to tell us that as part of the application submittal. I imagine they're going to have a bedroom or sleep in it, area to sleep in. But I don't even think there's an option to say a studio for an R new. But if it's an accessory dwelling unit, a secondary dwelling unit, then again, we're going to access the parking based on the bedroom of the addition of the either one bedroom dwelling unit or the parking of the single family home that's currently built on the site. So I see your point there. It does kind of get convoluted a little bit, but again, it's not trying to combat an issue. It's just trying to say, hey, we have a code that says this is a bedroom and you need to change your plan. That's all it is. But it does somewhat go back to parking. We just want to make sure that whatever we're approving is what they're proposing. If it's a 2-bedroom home, then we're just verifying that it meets the standards or parking standards for a 2-bedroom home. Or the setbacks or anything else that we would, because we look at parking pads too. So there's a whole mix of things that we look at as far as the R new. It's not just parking, it's setbacks, it's making sure the driveways are wide enough, the setbacks are right, it's deep enough to fit a car. So it's more than just that. But again, it's just giving us more code to say, we think you're this and can't approve your permit unless they prove otherwise or modify their plans.
All right, Bill, you want to go through this actually?
Eventually, yeah. So the next two definitions are really something that I know historically the city hasn't been too open to, but just opening up to allow food trucks and food truck courts as an allowed use, a permanent use in the city of Meridian. This has come up quite a few. Last couple of years, we've been seeing more and more of this, and I'm sure councils has probably seen more and more food trucks in our communities as well. So I thought it was time for us to address that. We meant to do it last year and just couldn't get to it because of the number of changes. But again, this is the definition that we've come up with, and this will align with other sections of code as we transition through the various pages. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but what I want to make clear to the council tonight is that a permanent use is completely different than a food truck approved under a temporary use. It's going to be, it's almost like what we did last year when we did vertically integrated live work units and home occupations. There's a tiered approach to getting you to what a temporary use is. You need to meet this threshold. If you want to just be a food truck on a permanent site, you have to be accessory to a primary business. And if you want a food truck court, then you're developing a site and you're creating the utilities for that and building structures and creating an ambiance, if you will, like you see in the larger cities with a shared structure, restroom facilities, maybe outdoor seating area, some parking to go with it. So again, there's going to be some improvements required with that. But I'll put a pin in that topic until we get to the specific use standards, but at least just want to set the foundation for that so you understand why we added a definition section here. And we have worked closely with Emily and legal to make sure that our definition of a food truck aligns with the temporary use standards, so there is no conflict or discrepancy between the two codes. We want them to align for sure. So you can see here another odd change in this first page is the table 2A2, where we allow manufactured homes. So there is a state code that requires cities to allow those on residential lots if they can meet all the other residential standards. So we have a conflict in our code with state code. So it's a cleanup item. We have to make sure that we can allow that as part of our community. And then as the mayor mentioned, here's the one where we're removing the minimum home sizes from our R2 and R4 districts to help with some of that, some of the conversations Caleb was having with our housing task force This is kind of step one, and then there'll be other changes probably next year to massage that and allow, particularly our AUP standards or temporary, or essentially ADU standards. We're going to change that to mimic that and make it a little easier for folks as well. These next couple of changes, again, go back to us allowing food truck court and food truck. So again, you can see here that we're allowing food trucks in all of our commercial districts as allowed uses. And then food trucks would be an accessory. So example, I think everyone's aware of Loose Screw Brewery coming into downtown. So their site plan, when they came through the city for their conditional use permit, showed a food truck out on one of a parking pad in front of their business. Well, the TUP allows them to do that, but it doesn't allow it to remain permanently. So the food truck would have to come and go and then leave at the end of the night. Well, under this scenario, if they were to do a CZC, they could have a food truck there permanent because they have a dedicated space, but it would need to be, you know, a nice food truck, integrate with the building and all those things. So again, I don't want to get into much of this because I will later on, but that's kind of the difference here is you can have one food truck, but not multiple. If you have more than one, then you're a food truck court and you need to do other things. So again, we're also allowing that in our downtown, our traditional neighborhood districts as well, which aligns with some of the feedback that I've heard from throughout the years. Next item on this list is, again, I try not to bring up parking too much, but recently it came to my attention that industry standards for carports is 9x18 for multifamily developments, and our parking standards are 9x19. So, and if they want to increase the size of a carport, it's extra money, extra engineering, and really the intent of the code is to have covered parking, not necessarily needing, and it covers the majority of the parking anyway. So I thought it was best that we clean up code so we don't have any more discrepancies out there with all the multifamily we've added over the recent years. Next item is one that's is a challenging topic. It's one that came to me from one of our stakeholders, one of our developers that we work closely with. They have some property that's adjacent to state highways. And they said, hey, what do we do when our overpass is taller than higher than our property, and how do we mitigate for noise moving forward? And it's like, that's a good point. We don't really think about that. And in our code, I think the council is aware that we do have alternative compliance to allow for these situations. It's difficult to write code for every situation you're going to run into, but that's why we've created alternative compliance to help with that. Vetted it. The other thing that came out of it, not necessarily with the fake focus group, but more internal with staff, is just the air quality issues. I think a lot of us understand that when you're adjacent to roadways, you're adjacent to high congested traffic areas, particularly 10 Mile now, with 10 Mile having a lot of traffic congestion and longer wait times at stoplights. Do we want that type of residential next to these facilities, or what standards do we need to get in place to make sure that we combat the air pollution as those residents live next to those types of facilities? It is a philosophical issue. It's hard to fix that with code, and I'm respectful of that, but there are ways to do it, and I've done a lot of research on that topic. So when this topic was approached and we brought it up with the UDC focus group, I think staff's opinion was the easiest way to handle it was through the tools that we already have, which is alternative compliance. All right, we understand you can't meet full compliance, but there has to be other ways to do it. And so that's where staff came up with this particular sentence. When it's not feasible, then let's do alternative compliance. And then there's other ways to do that. So you can either have deeper setbacks, have bigger buffers, have roads adjacent to the highway so you have greater separation. You can design the building with better AC or ventilation systems to filter the air. There's more, you can add more landscaping. There's ways to mitigate that based on a lot of the research that I did. And so in order to kind of inspire people to come up with the alternative compliance process, we also provided some graphics to go along with that to help just these aren't thou shalls. They're really examples. They're meant to, hey, these are ways you could achieve mitigation if you have that situation. Planning and Zoning Commission did support that approach. I know in my discussions with Laren, he's in the audience, in the group, they would like more express standards. I don't know how to do that. If I were to, in a perfect world, I'd say I would look at McDermott Village, that apartment complex that you did off right next to the interchange, U-Stick interchange. They actually had the landscape buffer, a road, another landscape buffer, and then the multifamily. So they had that separation from the freeway. And I know that takes up a lot of real estate, and that costs developers money, and I realize that. But if you were to ask staff to come up with those explicit standards like that, that would be the example that I would look at. I would say orient your open space and your roadway, and don't put buildable lots right up against the interchange. Pull it back and create that buffer zone so you don't have that situation. But we know that isn't always the right solution in a perfect world, and I recognize that. And that's why these graphics that you see here are ways to spur that conversation with that. And I realize that sometimes the development community or our applicants get gun shy to come forward with alternative compliance, because sometimes when there's a contested project and there is an alternative compliance, it seems misleading to the public that they're trying to get out of something, that alternative compliance is a variance to get out of code compliance. Yes, it is a staff level variance, but again, it's a means to do something equal to or better than. It's not a means to get out of code. So again, I'll let you kind of digest that or open up with questions. But again, this wasn't meant to add anything more difficult to code. It was actually to make it easier, or at least allow us to combat that issue and have that discussion and try to understand what that may be. Again, alternative compliance is a case-by-case basis. And I know if council drives down Chinden Boulevard, I know if you've seen what happened to some of those subdivisions with the widening of that road, that's what we're trying to prevent here. This is an entryway corridor, and we have to make sure that it's heavily scrutinized. We want a certain amount of landscaping there. We want beautification of our streets and our city. And that's the intent here. And we want to make sure that we don't contribute to that moving forward. But again, open to having feeling some questions, at least on this topic, because I know it is a big deal. And again, if council feels like we need to look at this more, vet it more, please feel free to say, pull it off, and we can look at it and study it even more and bring it back at a later date. But just at least want to have that conversation with tonight, at least get feedback on how the council feels on this particular topic.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Strainer.
I'm just curious about if you looked at it through the lens of like a public health standpoint. And I think one of the biggest issues being next to a roadway, like particulate matter, especially for young children, it's really bad if they're breathing in a lot of that stuff. Has any other city tackled it from more of a public health perspective and found a recommendation from that viewpoint? I'm just curious. I've never really thought about this in depth.
I know it is eye-opening, and I have read studies, and that's why I wanted to get these examples in the UDC, because again, it's one, to mitigate noise, but it's also two, the denser landscaping and that is what's going to purify the air. It's going to help with that. And the studies that I read have shown that. But like I said, is that where Meridian wants to go at this time? Because we are taking it from a public health safety issue, because we know there is particulate, the tires are kicking up dust. It's a proven fact. There's a lot of science on it. And I'm not an expert on it by any means. And I got overwhelmed researching it, to be honest with you, because there's so much data on it. Even from the Federal Highway Administration has pamphlets and all kinds of things, all kinds of studies. And you're right, we lean on ITD to do these studies and try to make sure they're looking out for us, but they're in the business of moving cars. They're not in the business of beautifying roadways. All they're going to do is, if the feds say it's this type of facility, you got to put up a block wall, or you got to, or mitigate it this way. And they can do it many different ways too. There's not one size fits all. But in my mind, when I had seen, and so the other thing for the council to consider is when we also approve those residential developments by Hawaii High School, the developer also, the council actually required a higher berm and a taller wall. So it was a 12-foot berm wall combination there with some dense landscaping.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor?
So again, just want to at least give you that context and that history
Councilman
of this
Taylor.
issue.
Bill, just a quick question on the alternative compliance. So if I'm to understand it correctly, what we currently have, alternative compliance is when, essentially when they can't comply with what we're asking because of for various reasons. So we allow them to come up with a way to comply. We're not giving them some guidance. That's currently it, right? That would be how you would describe it. And you're suggesting, here's some examples, not that we want to say how you have to do it, because trying to understand if we're going to allow them to propose alternative compliance, is it just wide open? Currently, the current system, is it just wide open to say, you give us your plan? And what you're suggesting here is, here's some guidance, but we're still not being overly prescriptive about how to meet that. Am I understanding and following that correctly?
Mayor, council, somewhat. I mean, the piece that you're missing here is the alternatives compliance section of code, and it says kind of the purpose of it and the findings you have to make for alternative compliance. So it's not you bring us your proposal and you're good. It's like you said, it's do you meet this criteria to even apply for it, which in this particular case, I think it's understandable how you mitigate noise when it's the roadway's higher than your buildable lots. You're not going to mitigate noise other than farther stuff. You're never going to mitigate 100% of it. You're going to manage the noise in this particular situation. But alternative compliance, yes, we meet with the applicants during a pre-application meeting and we say, hey, here's some suggestions you can do, but you're right, this code is not prescriptive, and nor do I want it to be, because again, we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis on what is the best interest of the city. Does this work? Does it meet the findings where we can support that or not? So to me, if we can give people examples, just like when we were in front of you with the staff report, you're just like, give me give me more pictures, give me more graphics, give me it bulletized, because I can understand that easier than paragraph and paragraph of technical review. It's no one in this room can understand what that means. But we have to try to explain it to you in layman's terms and even the public. And that's what we're trying to do here is like, do this or attempt this or look at a combination of these things and then propose something and we'll let you know if we like it or not.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
following up on what Councilman Taylor was saying, Bill, on several of these things, I'm assuming what I'm interested in is when we see that application come before us, are we going to be seeing then that the applicant is requesting alternative compliance and this is why? So what we're giving them is a window of how to do alternative compliance, but we're still going to see that as a request from the applicant on these different projects coming in for us.
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, absolutely. Yeah, we always, even though it may be a director's decision, we still like to note it on the agenda so the public is aware of what's coming before you. And we even have this, I even have staff say this is a director's decision, so try to avoid some of that confusion that we've heard over the years with the alternative compliance request. But we have recently, last year or last round or the previous round, if you recall, certain alternative compliance requests that are concurrent with a CEP, it becomes the commission's decision. Or if it has an MDA, then it becomes the CUP, the MDA, and the alternative compliance comes to you guys for review and approval. So you become the decision-making body. So we've even added that extra level of review just to make sure that people don't misunderstand what it is or that it's somebody trying to get out of code. Because that's the last thing that we want to do.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Strader.
So Bill, when you were creating these examples for alternative compliance, was that based on the studies you read and you felt like this amount of landscaping or berms or whatever accomplished certain things. I'm kind of curious what the principles were that you used. And actually, you know what? I don't want to take too much time. I'd be totally fine after this meeting if you wanted to send me a lot of that information.
Sure.
Just so I could kind of understand. It's very fascinating topic. And to be honest, I've not thought that much about it. I did like that example project that you mentioned, though. I felt like it struck the right balance, but it was a bit heavy-handed, frankly, but it maybe needed to be, I think, because of the dynamic of being right next to the highway. So,
So Councilwoman Strader, there is no scientific method to these graphics here.
okay,
It's what's currently it's taking what code requires and then showing you how you can work within that
Hmm.
throughout. So it's essentially along an entryway corridor or along a state highway, we require a 35-foot landscape buffer. So this is showing you that you could do it with a 35-foot buffer this way. You could do it with a 45-foot buffer. But really, the only code minimum is the 10-foot berm and or wall combination and a 35-foot landscape buffer. And then the entryway corridor requirements are in the landscape ordinance.
okay.
So again, in this situation, when you're trying to mitigate noise and even air quality, those standards may not be good enough to do that. So that's
Okay.
why I said it's this done. All I can tell you is all the scientific studies that I read, it says the more landscaping you have, the better it protects the noise and you clean the air better. And it gives you certain separations for that, how to achieve that. But no, we have not gone to that level here to do that, but I'm certainly happy to send you the information that I researched along with some of these schematics so you can blow them up on your screen and kind of read the text a little bit more. But a lot of places will have backage roads or frontage roads, whatever you call them, and then separate the homes
Mr.
from the
Mayor.
interstate or the freeway or the state highway.
Councilwoman Strader.
Yeah, that's very helpful if you could. And I think just every time we've ever done code changes, it is kind of an iterative process. Like I think we've always found that sort of rushing through code changes never works out. And so I personally would need time to sort of digest these, kind of ask some more questions, hopefully solicit feedback from, more Meridian residents, get their feedback. And I think it's great, though. It's off to a great start. I think it's creative how you've tried to show some examples. The food truck thing clearly was a blind spot that we needed to come up with a solution for. So I think that's awesome.
All right, perfect. Well, let's get to those standards and then we can get some more deliberations here. So I won't go over this next one. It's just a cleanup item. This is an interesting one for the council is our drive-throughs. I think with the pandemic, hard to believe we're still talking about it, but it's 4 years later and we're still talking about it. But we've seen an increase in drive-throughs and they can be a good thing and they can be a bad thing sometimes depending on how quickly you want to get through them and who the user is or who the business is. But this is one where we did spend quite a bit of time with the stakeholders and we wanted to make sure that got some more express standards. And a lot of times the last, couple of years, we've had multiple, just CUPs for drive-throughs over and over and over. And so, staff approached me, it's like, what can we do to make some of these things easier for ourselves? And so that's what I tried to do. So I looked at other city codes and kind of married up what we had. Kind of took my experience with the city. So I think council's aware a lot of times when annexations come in, they'll have a concept plan that has drive-throughs on it. And so it's like, aren't we really looking at it or vetting it at that point? Do we really need another level of scrutiny on it if we know that's what they want? So that's what I try to do with number one. It's really make it clear that, if you have an overall master development, a site plan for a development, like a 10-mile area, why do we need to go through a CUP if that's already baked into this? As long as we've analyzed that and share that with you as part of the annexation or concept plan, I think we could get there just doing that at staff level. And then
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, go ahead.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Bill, when it comes to drive-throughs, and you'll have to forgive me because I don't know, do we delineate between a drive-through at a bank versus a drive-through at a coffee shop versus a drive-through at a
In and out?
California-based cheeseburger restaurant, right? Because, I mean, the uses are really different, right? And I appreciate that you're bringing this. This is something I've really been thinking about the last few months. Just like we look at the difference in type of housing, there is a different type of use when it comes to drive-throughs. And how do we capture that so that when the public sees there's a restaurant with a drive-through proposed, that they have a better understanding as to what the intensity of that drive-through can be?
Yeah, Mayor and the council, I think we all understand, we can't create a code to combat all the other coffee shops or in and outs. I mean, it's just an anomaly in itself. And over time, those things will fade because we'll add more and more stores in the valley, and hopefully that traffic will slow down because there'll be other options, not just Meridian. But that's what I tried to do here. So no, in our code, a drive-through is a drive-through. Any kind of business you conduct within your vehicle is considered a drive-through under our code. But if you go down to the very last bullet point of this, number 6, we tried to say that differently. But it may not be to the way that the community thinks it's the right number. Again, I took this from a neighbor to the east, had some very specific standards on their drive-throughs. And they did define things a little bit different. And that's why they said food and beverages, you have a little bit more stacking requirements. And then all others would only be the two vehicles per service. So that's kind of what spearheaded that idea. That's where we landed on. Is that the right number? I don't know. But for the most part, a lot of times when we meet with applicant, we say on drive-throughs, we say, please tell us your operation. How do you operate your drive-through? Because I know some businesses have people out in the drive-through lane taking orders, trying to move cars. Some of them have, hey, pull to these pickup spots and we'll walk your food out to you. So not all drive-throughs are created equal. And I think those business owners, those operators know that business better than we do. But that's what I'm trying to do here is differentiate between some of those. Because a bank is completely different.
Mayor, Bill,
Councilman Cavanagh.
we look at it differently from a pickup, right? So my family got pizza this weekend. We went to the pizza place and you hit a little button on your phone and they bring it out to you. That's not a drive-through. That's a pickup. That's different than driving through a lane and somebody handing us something. We have drive-through pizza places here in Meridian too. Mayor, council, this is something that I think that the enthusiasm for drive-throughs, we're going to continue just to see more and more of. People want to conduct more commerce in their car. And I think that we've got an opportunity when we're looking at this. I do think there's a different use between banking in my car and the time that I spend there and the stacking that occurs there versus getting dinner for my family in a drive-through lane with 40 other vehicles. And a bank usage makes sense kind of in a, in a neighborhood collector, but a very popular California-based cheeseburger restaurant probably doesn't make sense on those same roadways. And so I do think that maybe we've got to take a look at this and make sure that we are aligning that, again, just like there's a difference between housing products. I do think that there is a difference, and we have a difference in business uses. We may need to challenge ourselves, and certainly the UDC committee, the Planning and Zoning Commission, our staff, to say, are we meeting our community's expectations for when we say it's a drive-through, that they are going to fully understand what that use is? As we've seen in the last 5-10 years, I don't think everyone does understand. So just my 2 cents on that particular piece. I'm uniquely interested in it. I know as new locations have popped up, as we've, approved a fast food restaurant, we've all received emails and calls with concerns about that particular business. And it's a lesson in civics that we don't regulate specific types of business, but use. But there is a different type of use that is coming from drive-throughs depending on the type of business.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Strader.
is there any other limitation or maximum saturation of the number of drive-throughs that could be in one development? Just curious about that because I'm thinking of, we've had a couple of projects recently where we had like 4 being proposed in one parcel and it can become very cumbersome with that many in one place. I don't know, maybe we'll just deal with it case by case. I do agree there may be some differentiation would be worth looking at, like there's a great dry cleaner in the Orchard Park development that it's a drive-through dry cleaner. It's like the most convenient thing I've ever seen and there's no stacking, so no one's lining up, it's fine. So I do feel like there may be a way to put a finer point on it. I appreciate you trying to tackle this one.
So Mayor and Council, on that specific topic, you're correct. There is no limitation on the number of drive-throughs on a particular property. That is actually getting removed from this code section. So it says here before, if a drive-through is within 300 feet of another drive-through, then they would trigger a CUP because we wanted to see that site circulation and how they would, if there were any conflicts that could occur or too many on the site. But when you look at an Orchard Park and even the Costco site, I would argue there's probably too many of those, but they seem to be functioning and operating and haven't seen any more complaints on that. But that was the reason why the code was this way for so many years, is because we were, the example over on where Taco Bell is and the Kentucky Fried Chicken is on Main Street and Meridian Road. Yeah, they had conflicts over there. So we created this code to have separation between them. It's based on what I received from the feedback. Again, if we do our job at the front end, at the annexation, I think we could probably capture it pretty well. But like you said, if it's a small infill and they want 3 drive-throughs on it, it's going to be a little tough. They may not be able to meet. There's still going to be specific use standards they have to comply with as far as escape lanes and site circulation. You can't stack on public streets. So we can still analyze those things. But again, if it's in staff's hands and we're approving it at staff level, the only recourse is to appeal staff's decision and come to city council. At least with a CUP, you can scrutinize things a little bit more. So just add appropriate conditions if need be. So something to consider. But I'll go ahead and transition from this topic. I think I've captured your thoughts and we can deliberate up more on this as well. So here's the 2 new specific use standards that are proposed to be added to code. One, you can see here's the food truck court. So again, this is pretty well researched. So looked and saw what other communities did, kind of looked at our code and kind of blended the two to align with a lot of our similar language. So you can see here, if the food truck court does abut a residential district, you're capping the hours at 6 to 11, which is our noise ordinance. Again, I want to make sure that food trucks they're picking up trash. It's clean. It's not just a rundown trailer on the site. Again, they do require inspection by the Central District Health Department and Fire Department. So that was added at the recommendation of both fire and legal. Want to make sure that, again, they'll have to install utilities, so they have to have access to power and, gas or anything else they need to operate. Don't want to hear a bunch of generators running at night and disrupting people. I think they call them pedestals or whatever it may be. I think all of us have been to an RV park, so we understand what you need, the hookups and everything you need to run those things. Would like to have them again, requirement to have some outdoor seating, outdoor seating. So there's some of the examples that I saw where they would have even like a tap room, like a bar inside of it, and then everyone back the food trucks up to covered parking, and then you could go in and get your drink, but still get food and sit out and recreate. So I think the good opportunity there to kind of have build a little community, food truck community in our boundaries of our city. And then want to make sure there's trash receptacles and waste removal on the site, and then don't want to have any portable sheds or porta pots ending up on a permanent site. So that's what we're trying to avoid here when we say permanent structures or access to restroom facilities. We don't, it's meant to it's a permanent use, not a temporary use. And then a lot of the same things carry over. The interesting part about the food truck and the conversation that I had with the Planning and Zoning Commission was just the parking, the number of parking spaces that I required with this change. So you can see here, G, 2 parking spaces per each food truck. And they're like, why require parking? And it's like a lot of our commercial uses require parking. And again, it's the intent here is you have some level of commitment. What if it gets redeveloped or doesn't make it, or you got to have something in place for a lot of the landscaping and things that we require for commercial development will be required as well, and parking. But at the same time, the discussion at Planning and Zoning Commission is, what if we're in downtown? We don't have any parking. What do you do then? So again, they didn't propose any language or any changes, but they did ask me to kind of look into that a little bit more, and I said I would bring it up with all of you, but it's certainly something to consider. A lot of, in our code, we do allow alternative compliance if you have shared parking. So that's one way to get around that. And then in downtown, it's a completely different animal. You can go to MDC and ask for them to analyze your parking, and they can make a recommendation to the director, and he can approve it or not approve it. So again, there's ways to get there, but at least keep that in mind. I'm kind of curious how the council feels about us requiring parking for food trucks when it's not technically a structure. It is a mobile vending unit. But again, if they built a permanent structure on the site, then we would apply those commercial standards, which was based on the zoning district. So again, is that the better way to proceed? That if there are permanent structures, you comply with the commercial parking standards, or leave it the way staff has it posed and see how it works, see where it may fall, see how it impacts maybe future food courts. And then the next item, the food truck itself, again, a few minor changes, but probably the bigger noted one is we don't want them to lose parking on the site. We want them to have a dedicated space for it on a site plan. We want them to meet work within the hours of operation for the primary business, because they are being approved as an accessory use. Again, all the same inspections required, Central District Health Fire Department, and then they have to have access to the trash enclosure on the site. They can't park in any required landscaping on the property, and then really no parking standards, because we're with it being accessory, they should be adequate parking to allow this type of use. But again, you can see they're pretty similar, but overall, I think that the UDC focus group and staff felt pretty comfortable with these changes. But anything on that particular topic? I won't hit on the last one because it's just more, the last item is just cleanup, but really just land on these 2 topics and see where how the council feels about them.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Carver.
couple questions, some comments. Bill, appreciate you bringing this. So I want to start first and just reference the example that you started about loose screw. It sounds like loose screw, right? They're proposing to have a food truck that is permanent, and 11.4.3.52 guides that. But towards the end of your description, you made a comment that if another food truck showed up, well, now we've got a food truck court. Now, are you meaning if another permanent food truck showed up? Okay, 'cause that's the part that I was concerned about, is Loose Screw sets up, they've got a food truck, and now Luke's food truck wants to co-opt that business, so I bring my food truck over there, and now we've created a burden on Loose Screw. So it doesn't prevent somebody else from being able to set up a food truck and following code as written about that, and forcing another business to try and file as a food truck.
Mayor, council, that's the same discussion I had with planning and zoning, because they were getting the TU. Again, if he wants if that business owner wants to have an event there, they can file for a TUP for an event and have those activities there for the day or whatever the event may be, and then they go home for the night. It's not permanent. It's approved under a different permit.
Perfect. And two comments about the food truck court. And one is your criteria about that it's clean. Certainly, right? We all want things to be clean and presentable, but boy, I've got a teenager and hey, is your room clean? Yes. He believes that it is. I poke my head and I say no, right? It's very subjective. So how do we, I always get a little antsy about code that can be more subjective. So how do we manage that? And it's in there because we think it's important. So how do you enforce that and what's the criteria?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, you're right, it's subjective. I think the intent is you don't have food dripping off the sides of it, right? You're sanitary, you're keeping it cleaned up. You don't have trash all around it. You don't have generators and cords going everywhere. You don't have whatever you need to operate. And it's meant to be orderly and maintained and right appearance. That's the intent. No one's going to say, oh, your paint's flaking off or your window's cracked. But obviously they should fix those things.
So, Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Some suggestions might be, right, is to provide waste receptacles and free of, electronic encumbrances that pose a safety issue, something like that. I'm sure our fire department can maybe help with some language. That would just be my suggestion. And then my second piece of comment is about the parking requirement. And some of these make sense in a residential use. You're doing a food truck court, in kind of more of a residential area. I think parking sometimes is the antithesis of a food truck, right? It's like it's that convenient thing that's right there in front of you. Did planning and zoning have any conversations about maybe a different set of standards within the Old Town region? And does that make more sense to have maybe one set of guidance outside of Old Town and a separate set within Old Town? And is that something that was discussed? Was there any input that you would want to share with us?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, we did. That's something that when we talked about it, we said, one, again, it was the parking. Certainly, there could be a standard added here that's within the downtown. You don't require parking, or Old Town zone. There's parking isn't required. That's one way to get there too. And yeah, that's something that the commission and I did discuss. But again, they didn't propose any of that language for changes this evening, but certainly that's within the council's purview tonight to say that parking wouldn't be allowed if this was established in the Old Town zone. We can wordsmith that or something to that effect, but yeah, we do that. I think even looking at some of our specific use standards that we recently changed, we've kind of required more parking in Old Town, which it wasn't necessarily the intent. So it may be a good opportunity for us to go back and look at that as well, those other specific use standards. But to your point, we want to incentivize business downtown. And we all know parking can be a challenge on some of these infill pieces, and you may not get parking.
Well, and just so I'm clear, so I'm not confusing, we have a food truck court, which is multiple food trucks. We have a food truck, which is at a permanent location, and then we have food trucks under TUP, which don't have any of these requirements to begin with. So I think that there is you may want parking because I think about other communities you go to where they technically have food trucks, which are replacing buildings. So do you want them in that location to have the same parking standards as other businesses or not? And that's the question. If they're a permanent fixture in our downtown, that would be my question. Are you going to treat them differently or not? Because that's the different than someone pulling up on the street and taking over a parking spot for an hour or 2 hours during the day.
Mr. Mayor, just to kind of
Councilman
follow
Taylor.
a little bit on that, the idea with the, what are we calling it, the food truck court, the idea though is it's a permanent parking lot essentially for food trucks, but the idea is not that the food truck itself is a permanent facility. It could rotate, it could be a different kind, but we're just creating a specified, standardized location that everyone complies with, but it would be rotating. That's the idea here, right?
Yeah, and just add on, and that's why I think this is actually not necessarily for a food truck operator. This is more for a landowner, even in a lot of ways more so, which kind of makes some of these makes food truck shall, going back to the clean appearance. Well, this is a landowner's responsibility, I think more so, or less so than a owner of a food truck responsibility who's coming in and out every day.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem like it's almost like a trailer park in some sense, that someone owns the land and someone owns the facility and they can come and go in some regard. But I mean, I would think there'd be some real good business opportunities for people who provide a food truck court as a way to attract a lot of people.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
just a off comment on the parking requirement. As I've been sitting here thinking through it, if we didn't have a parking requirement on food truck court per food truck, I could see where we're almost creating a situation that a brick and mortar sits in front of us and we require quite a bit of parking from them for a restaurant. And we need to have some level of fairness in what we do in a food court, depending on how big it is. So they provide that same level of service and availability for parking, because if they're not going to provide it, you know they're going to be dumping somewhere else for that parking request.
Doesn't it seem like everything comes back to parking at the end of the day?
So Mayor, Council, I don't have anything else to add to the discussion tonight. So if you want to open it up to a public testimony, then maybe come back to some of these topics, certainly can do that. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, this is a public hearing. Do we have anybody from the public that'd like to come forward and provide testimony on this item based upon what was presented or what they've heard tonight? You'd like to come forward, please? State your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Kelly Childs. My address is 1100 West Idaho Street, Suite 210. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for having me tonight. I come here to speak in support of the code text changes, specifically the section 11.4.3.11, which we've talked about a little already, and that is the changes to the conditional use permit requirements as it relates to drive-throughs. Thank you. I'm a professional engineer at Kimley Horn, so my colleagues and I deal with projects that would apply to this section of code every day. We believe this is a good change in the code because it would require less conditional use permits and take a burden off of the planning staff and you guys from having to go through these as much as you need to. We believe that drive-throughs, specifically the code of this that we're like the best to see changed is that a drive-through within 300 feet of another drive-through could be changed, because when you have a drive-through next to another drive-through, that those uses kind of already go together. So having a conditional use permit is kind of redundant. Lastly, the stacking lane and dimensional requirements for the drive-through standards that are included in the bottom of that text section, we believe adequately address, enforce a drive-through operator to plan for their drive-through operations in a way that won't make their neighbors negatively impacted. So thank you so much for your time tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them, but thank you.
Council, have any questions? Councilman Counter.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course.
And appreciate your expertise. So you heard a little of the discussion I had with staff about variety of uses for drive-throughs. I'm just curious, from a professional capacity, what's a response to something like that?
So two things. I would say that the majority of drive-through providers that I would work with have much higher standards for their own selves than what any typical code would require. I guess the second part to that would be, I had something else.
it's okay. Put you on the spot. Don't worry.
Yeah, no. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Maybe to follow up on that component, what is in the professional world, what is a drive-through lane? What constitutes, because we have some drive-throughs that stack around a corner of a hard corner on a building.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're pre-existing. And then also, you know, not all bank makes it, but they have drive-throughs and then they can get repurposed like Marco's Pizza in South Meridian or
yeah.
other things. Thoughts on having the different standards of drive-throughs compared to a building that may not be the ultimate purpose long-term?
Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense to have like the 5 separated from the 2 for uses as like a banks. That makes sense that they would have a lot less stacking spaces than something like a McDonald's would. So I think that that makes sense. I don't know that there's specific standards for what constitutes a drive-through. I think that that's something that we would look for to be defined by a code in any given city.
Do you have any experiences or challenges where you have an existing drive-through of one use and someone comes in for a different use and it becomes challenging because there's not an adequate? That's really where I would go through. Something that's inadequate or adequate for one type of use, but won't be adequate for a future use. Therefore, the building maybe is hard to repurpose.
Yeah, I've never seen that specifically, but that's something that we would have to look at when you were going through like an entitlement process or looking at a site for future improvements.
Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bill, just out of your curiosity, and Lauren, go ahead and come on up, Lauren. What do we have at that, like, I think of, it's over there in El Dorado where you just have some hard corners coming in for the Jimmy John's, for example. There is some stacking, but it also goes around the corner. If you have a 5 and a 2, what qualifies? Does it have to be separated? Is it just paint on the ground that goes back to hard case? So any guidance, thoughts? Do we get into that level of detail?
Mayor, members of the council, I'm familiar with that Jimmy John's. It does wrap around kind of weird around that building.
Yeah, I don't know that's
I remember.
intentional, but you sometimes you have to, but they actually may, yeah, they don't have, I don't think they have I don't use it. My wife goes there. I don't know where they have the speaker, if it's on the back or if it's on the side.
I think you order on the app. That's
Most
the
of the
thing is a
times.
lot of people have apps now. They don't even have speakers. And so like going to tonight's discussion is, yes. So in those instances, when we've gone through a conditional use, we're like, you're not approved for a speaker. And if you have a speaker in the future, you come back and see the city. That's how detailed we've gotten in these CUPs. And it could just make a lot of extra work for all of us that we're trying not to do. But we realize things change. Like you said, the Marco's Pizza. That was a bank. And now we've got a pizza place there. But again, when they come to us, we're like, you have a drive-through. We have to approve them. It's because they have an entitlement for a drive-through. But going back to your point, Mayor, it depends on how much stacking they need to provide. So in this particular scenario, if they have an escape lane or if they have a stacking lane that's over 150 feet or 100 feet, they have to provide an exit lane. So that's why we were specific that if they have to do that, then the minimum dimensions is going to be 10 feet for each lane. So if they want their stacking lane is over 100 feet, one of those lanes has to be 10 feet, and the be able to get out of the drive-through has to be the additional 10 feet. So in that case, it wouldn't be striped, but it'd be 20 feet wide so that a car could conceivably go around another vehicle and exit if there was an emergency or they forgot their wallet or something. But that's why we specifically added that. So there is no specific requirement as how to, but in instances, I'm thinking of Chipotle on Meridian Road where we actually had them change the configuration of the drive aisle to one way because of the conflicts of coming off of Meridian Road and turning into that site. And we had them reorient the traffic going one way north out of that site so they would not have that conflict with cars entering. So those are instances where a conditional use can give you that latitude to require that. Whereas maybe when we get to CDC and design review, staff level, it's like, meet the code, we got to approve it. So again, a lot to think about here, but as you just heard, A lot of these standards are consistent throughout the nation for these drive-throughs. They really do. A lot of them say the same thing. Make sure you don't block roads, make sure you don't block access, make sure you have, you know, the windows away from residential. I mean, there's nothing new here. I should say that's different than any other code. It's just trying to define it a little bit better. And at least just make it clear that if your site plan shows it on your overall annexation or your big mixed use development or employment area, let's just make it staff level. We've already analyzed it through a concept plan. That's really the goal here, the intent of the change.
All right, Lauren, take us home, solve it all for us.
Mr. Mayor, Council, hopefully this will be quick.
I'm sorry, Lauren, do you want me to pull up your
No, let's just wait, because I don't think we need to get to it. So again, my name is Lauren Bailey. My work address is 4824 West Fairview Avenue, Boise, Idaho. And I'm here representing a lot of hats tonight. Conger Management Group, BlackRock Homes. And then also I just came from a BCA meeting before this meeting, the Builder Contractors Association, and we discussed this in depth, and they had a few comments they asked me to pass along as well. I really only have one. Well, first off, I want to start out by saying that I'm also a member on the focus group with Bill, and we all appreciate being allowed to be involved and to put our 2 cents in and to work towards a common goal. And Bill's done a great job with a lot of these issues, and a lot of them are difficult, and he spends a lot of time researching them and bringing them to the group, and then we send him in another direction, and I'm sure he's frustrated with us. And I think 99% of what you heard tonight is amazing and is ready for prime time. I've just got the one issue, the one area that I think Commissioner Strader talked about a little bit, or excuse me, Councilman Strader talked about a little bit, and that is just the 11-3H-1 that we talked about, the highway and the mitigation next to that, the berming, the wall, the plantings. I think Bill's done a great job, but there's 2 issues we have, and I don't want to go into all the details, but I think we just need more time. And I'm just asking you to kind of send this back to staff a little bit. Let us go through this with them and come to a better conclusion on a few of these items. And I think that there's still a lot of issues with it that need to be resolved. I don't think it's insurmountable. I think it can be done. We just need to work through it. But part of it was, and again, I'm not trying to, Bill's got a lot on his plate and he's doing a lot, but some of this we didn't see until last Wednesday. And that's even those cross sections. I mean, those weren't presented at planning and zoning. We didn't see those until last Wednesday. So we don't feel like we've really had time to comment on those. I think that they're close, but I think there's some issues there that need to be resolved. So that's all we're asking for, just a little more time to work on that with staff. I think the rest of it's great. I did prepare a PowerPoint if we really want to go in the weeds, but I'd rather just give us a little time. We'll get it juiced up and bring it back before you, if that works for the mayor and council. Okay.
I had a sneaking suspicion this was not going to be approved tonight one way or the other. So I think there's time for conversations with council or with the staff to explore items without any issues. Council, any questions specifically on?
I'll sit down. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else would like to come up and provide testimony this evening? Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cameron.
a couple just maybe other quick comments. Align, it just 11-5A-6D4, just about proof of posting. I know that's kind of a cleanup piece, but it did spark at least a thought for me that I want to just plant for you, Bill, and staff, is if we have the ability on our sign posting to include a QR code so that people can, when they see the sign. I've had some feedback from some folks that, hey, I see something on 10 Mile or, Highway 55, and I'm driving fast. I can't pull over. It would be good to know if there's either a way, like when I'm at a stoplight, I can try and zoom in and snag it so that I can learn more information about it. Again, not something that I think needs to be included with this next round, but just, we'll get to some of my comments here a little bit later about forecasting some of this, but just something that when I saw that we had that one, I wanted to at least just pose for you and staff.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Strader.
I think it would be great to, I'd like to hear from fellow council members on this, but if there is interest from us as a collective group, I think it would be great just to hear a suggestion from planning staff on how to try to tackle this, home occupation accessory use issue regarding pools, if they're being used for swimming lessons in neighborhoods. I think it is really going to impact a lot of people to wait to address that. So if it's possible, it sounds like this might get continued. If it's possible to hear from staff on that, that would be great.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Straight. Councilmember Straight and I were talking earlier tonight, and we said, you know, what if I'm a daycare that does swimming lessons as part of my curriculum, right? That would probably fly under our code. I don't know, I'm not the expert, but there certainly are some intentions and maybe code is getting in the way where we want. I know we are getting close to kind of, right, school starts tomorrow, unofficial end of summer, but I don't want what is written in code to maybe get in the way of how, you know, some individuals have been operating their little side business this summer. So I don't know if it's something we can bring back with, if we're going to continue this, or if it's something that we have to prolong until the next time these come back. But I hope would be is if we can find a more simple solution on this sooner rather than later. It's probably the right.
Bill, any comments you'd like to make at this time?
Mayor and council, I would. I know I was copied on that email chain last week. My heart goes out to that woman because certainly, again, we don't know until we get the email or the phone call. As you guys know, we're complaint driven. We don't go out seeking code violations. And my staff said she's a wonderful woman, very kind, polite. She's been doing it for a while and just wants to know what rules she needs to follow. And unfortunately, the rules don't work in her favor currently, and that occurs sometimes. But like I mentioned in my opening statement with the council, this topic was discussed 5 or 6 years ago, and it was at the time city was dealing with a lot of code complaints with people running businesses outside of their home, using those outdoor sheds or doing things in their driveways, and people were dropping off vehicles to get repaired and get their vehicles detailed. And we put together a whole group and got all the experts together, and we came back with a code change. And that group all said that, you know what, we need to keep it inside the home. And I certainly want to respect what the council wants me to do, but I just at least think it's important to know that history of how we got to where we got, because some of you don't know that, you weren't part of that. And I'm a big believer of that. You know, we got to know where we came from before we go forward. And so I just wanted to at least give you that context tonight that yes, swim lessons. I like the creativity. Hey, get your daycare license and then let the kids swim in your pool. Teach them preschool, whatever it is. Yes, that certainly can fit under that umbrella if they can meet all the requirements she needs. She'll have to get licensed through, get her fire department inspection, get her certifications. There's always going to be something that you have to need to comply with. It's not just going to be, yes, you can do that and move on. We know government isn't that way, unfortunately. It's job security. Unfortunately, we gotta prevent bad things from happening. As you know, sometimes government does that. So again, yes, I'm willing to at least entertain that and look at that. If that's something that you're passionate about adding to this round, just push me out farther or direct me to come back with something different and move these forward. I mean, you have a lot of options this evening. If you want to digest these more, you can certainly continue it, digest what we have on the table today. Come back in 2 weeks, close this one out, open the other one, and look at home occupations. Or if you want staff to study the highway standards some more, you know, vacate that one and move forward with the rest of them if you like those, and we at least get that ordinance done. And again, we did that with the building height discussion we had last year. You asked me to remove that 100-foot height exception from the UDC changes. It's parked for now, but certainly we can park these and study them a little bit more too. So again, It's really what do you want staff to look at? Again, if you want me to add AUPs, then push me out a month. I mean, give me some time to do some research and, because I don't want to just open it up to outdoor usage, because again, you just don't know what you're going to get. Someone can say, I want to teach batting lessons in my backyard, and they'll have 5 batting cages, and pretty soon you're just hearing balls getting hit all night long. Again, I know it seems a little ridiculous, but you'd be very surprised. I've been in those rooms with code enforcement, and you'd be surprised what the creativity some people will come up with. And it can be challenging. And I feel for our team members that are in code enforcement. It is not an easy job.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, I think with regard to, um, a potential CUP perhaps around, pools that teach seasonal swimming lessons specifically in their outdoor pool or something like, I was envisioning something pretty narrowly tailored. I think it could assume certain hours of operation similar to a daycare. I kind of look at it a lot like a daycare in a way. And I think there should still be some sort of a process for someone who's seeking that approval to do that, to come before us, and we can hear from neighbors if neighbors are really concerned that they're going to be impacted. So I was sort of envisioning a similar kind of a process to what we do with a daycare. I guess the bottom line is, from your perspective, though, you feel like in 2 weeks, that's just not enough time to try to tackle. Okay. Yeah, I think with regard to feedback on these, like I need 2 weeks on these myself just to digest these and kind of ask questions and kind of noodle on them. I guess I would just ask that you start working on that issue when you have capacity. Again, I think in a narrowly tailored context, I respect the background on the issue and that, we don't necessarily, we don't want to end up with a big circus, but at the same time, I do think that, freedom for people to make a living is important. And, but at least this is the one that sort of occurred to me, like we should tailor something around this, type of use specifically. I don't know. That's the feedback I have at this point.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Taylor.
I'm with Councilwoman Strader. I'd like, kind of wanted to hear the presentation tonight and kind of digest it, this being the first time I'm tackling this kind of a topic. So I'd like a couple of weeks to kind of contemplate this. I think with Lauren's request that they'd like some more time to work with, I think that would be reasonable as well. A lot of these seem like they make some sense, but it's also the first time I'm kind of grappling with food trucks and size of the bedroom and things like that. So I'd like some time to kind of consider that and think about that a little bit as well. With respect to occupation in the home, I appreciate that history that you provided. I mean, I'm a big advocate too of allowing people freedom to work out of their homes. I think it's a lot more, with COVID, I think more and more people are looking at doing that. But I do think my perspective would be, how do you accommodate a specific type of use, which I like that, but I also would like some uniformity for everyone. I would like to see, my instinct would be fewer regulations to allow more uses, but I've not been in those rooms with code enforcement. I can only imagine some of the stories been heard. So I'm not particularly opposed to considering a specific use on the circumstance we're discussing, but I would be hesitant to create a specific UDC changes for just one small narrow use because I don't think that's fair to others who may have a similar argument, and yet we're not considering those uses. So I'd like to consider that a little bit too, and that's a longer conversation, I think. I don't know if that's something we should maybe that's a future topic that council we should consider. Is our code aligned with currently where we are with people's having a greater desire to work from home, greater desire to be creative in how they can earn a living. I mean, 5 years ago, the world was very different in terms of the opportunities you had to work from anywhere. And so I actually think it might be something that we dive into as a broader topic and get it all right as opposed to a specific use. That would be my feedback.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
So I agree. I think the consensus is we at least want a couple weeks before we take another look at this, and I agree with that. I'm going to kind of give you a little flip on the pool incident. I ran code enforcement. And for every one person that you have that might say that this is bad and I can't do my use, they might have 100 complaints that they're dealing with across this city, which is one of the reasons why these meetings took place and these solutions had to be found and had to be done in such a way that it only allowed uses inside the house. And I'm sure Lieutenant Harper can talk about things more currently than I can, but you really have to be careful we don't create a slippery slope by trying to allow one use in, because you have to set up a set of rules at some point. Unless we want to invite Lacey to come in and speak from code enforcement and give you the background and all the things that they see and do in this city and what they try to do to prevent. Because while we're talking about one person that lives in that home, we may be talking about the impact and quality of life of lots of people that live around these things that we work to prevent all the time. So there's a flip side to this whole story we need to be aware of as we progress. So.
And that was what I was going to suggest is it might make sense to have Lacey or someone from the police department identify what code complaints we're receiving about home occupations as a general update on things. That being said, if there was a way to grant, I'm going to call it a temporary restraining order to allow the work to continue until we go through our process. And again, I have no idea about this person. Do they have a heated pool that they do this year round? Do they stop tomorrow when school goes back into session? What are we potentially able to allow for a brief time period while this issue is addressed? Is it a 30-day component for this person? I could be supportive of something limited that's not against the law while we research a larger component if possible. So that's at least, but I do think the larger, because yeah, I remember the conversations that were people that were selling clothing out of their garages, basically permanent, I don't want to call them yard sales because I think they were off the rack, type stuff that they were just coming in home occupation out of the garage. Which then gets into what? Parking, because people aren't using their garage for parking, I mean, so anyways, Mr. Neri, any feedback on my dumb statements?
Mr. Mayor, no, those are spot on. The answer is yes, but. So yes, we can work with the individual and the circumstance that's occurring, but as was stated earlier, code enforcement is all complaint driven.
Correct.
Right? So there's a complainant that is concerned about how this is being done. So again, our code enforcement are masters of working with our neighbors and neighborhoods and individuals, and we can work on that. And we've had the same conversation with planning and internally on how to apply a daycare sort of standard, because as council's pointed out tonight, I mean, daycares operate similarly. Some have pools, maybe they're not doing lessons, but they have pools and they have other uses outside. So we can thread that needle, and I'm sure we can work with code and the complaint in this individual. Again, this being potentially a seasonal activity, this season is going to be over here fairly soon as well. So I think we can work through it. I think we can come up with a solution with planning and bringing something forward in the code change in the future. But I'm not concerned that we're going to put somebody out of business today. We can work through those issues and come up with a solution that we can work with the complainant and figure this out.
Mayor.
Mr. Harper, Lieutenant.
Mayor, members of council, are you guys wanting something via email with educating you guys on kind of the complaints we're dealing with, home occupancy businesses, or you want Lacey to come in because she's definitely the person to to share that information. She's very knowledgeable.
Maybe plan on her coming unless it's like we've gotten one complaint in 2 years. You know, maybe evaluate it, you know, and you could just reach out to, have her or yourself or someone provide me the information, and then we can determine what's the appropriate way.
Perfect.
But
Thank you.
so with that, council, do we have a time frame that we'd like to continue this public hearing?
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
while we were deliberating, I had a chance to connect with the clerks. Mr. Clerk is maybe suggesting September the 10th. So a little bit longer than 2 weeks, but with, we've got a couple of agendas in front of us with some budget deliberations, some other larger applications. And so rather than asking our great staff to come and then maybe we continue it because the meeting runs long, let's just plan and plan right. So, Mr. Mayor, unless
Councilman
there's
Cavanagh.
any continued deliberation, I'd move that we continue item 25, the 2024 UDC text amendment proposed changes to September 10th.
Second?
Have a motion and a second to continue item 25 to September 10th. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the item is continued. With that, we'll move on to item 26, which is ordinance number 24-2056. And for the record, Councilman Whitlock had technology issues and had to drop off earlier. So we'll ask the clerk to read ordinance number 24-2056 by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to Two Mustard Seeds Women's Resale Shop, H 2024-0009, for a rezone of a parcel of land being a portion of Lot 2, Block 1 of Westview Addition to Meridian Subdivision as filed in Book 2 of Plats at page 68, Records of Ada County, Idaho. More particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 0.63 acres of land from R8 zoning district to the OT zoning district in Meridian City Code. Directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps as well as official zoning maps and all applicable official maps depicting the boundaries and the zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance. Providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? Hearing and seeing none, I have a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
move we approve ordinance number 24-2056.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 24-2056. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Next item up is item 27, which is ordinance number 24-2057. That's the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an ordinance related to Rosalind subdivision H 2023-0056, annexing a parcel of land located in the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 19, Township 3 North, Range 1 East, Boise Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, more particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 0.014 acres of real property from RUT to R8 zoning district, directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps, as well as all official zoning maps and official maps depicting the boundaries and the zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance. Providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, repealing conflictive ordinances and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
move we approve ordinance number 24-2057.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 24-2057. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh. Little Roberts. Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Next item up is item 28, ordinance number 24-2058. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to Pebblebrook subdivision H 2024-0005, annexing a parcel of land located in the northeast quarter of Section 24, Township 4 North, Range 1 West, Boise, Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, more particularly described in Exhibit A, rezoning 13.94 acres of such real property from RUT to R8 zoning district, directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps, as well as the official zoning maps and all official maps depicting their boundaries in the zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance. providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, repealing conflicting ordinances and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? Seeing none, I have a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
move we approve ordinance number 24-2058.
I have a motion second to approve ordinance number 24-2058. Is there any discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh, Little Roberts, Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strater.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Council, anything more under future meeting topics than we've already discussed? Okay, then do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The